The Witch of Salisbury, the woman who came before Salem. Tonight, we travel to the ancient city of Salisbury, a city of narrow streets, ancient stone buildings, hidden courtyards, and one of the tallest cathedral spires in England. For centuries, the cathedral has watched over the city, its great spire rising above the rooftops, visible for miles across the surrounding countryside. And beyond those fields, standing beneath the open sky, lies another ancient mystery, Stonehenge, the great circle of stones older than written history, older than kingdoms, older than memory itself. For thousands of years, people have looked upon those stones and wondered who built them, why were they built, and what secrets have they witnessed. Even today, there are those who claim the land around Salisbury holds something unusual, something ancient, something difficult to explain. Whether that is true, no one can say. But during the 17th century, many people believed strange forces moved through the world around them. They believed spirits walked unseen. They believed demons whispered in darkness. They believed witches lived among ordinary people. And in the year 1653, those fears would focus upon one woman. Her name was Anne Bodenham. And before the infamous Salem Witch Trials, before America became consumed by fear and accusation, Anne Bodenham would become one of England's most famous accused witches. Anne Bodenham was not born into wealth, nor was she a powerful figure. She lived an ordinary life in Salisbury. Yet, over time, stories began to surround her. Some called her wise. Others called her dangerous. People visited her seeking answers, seeking comfort, seeking knowledge. They came with questions about lost objects, questions about sickness, questions about love, questions about the future. In an age where medicine was limited and uncertainty was everywhere, many people turned to so-called cunning women believed to possess unusual knowledge of herbs, knowledge of healing, knowledge of things hidden from ordinary sight. Anne Bodenham became known as one of these women, and for many years that seemed harmless enough. But fear has a way of changing things, especially when people begin searching for someone to blame. The England of Anne Bodenham's day was filled with uncertainty. Civil war had scarred the country. Religious tensions remained high. Many believed the devil actively walked among mankind. Misfortune rarely seemed accidental. If crops failed, someone must be responsible. If illness struck, someone must be responsible. If tragedy arrived, someone must be responsible. And often, that someone became a witch. Rumours began spreading through Salisbury. Whispers exchanged in markets. Quiet conversations in taverns. Stories carried from neighbour to neighbour. Stories involving Anne Bodenham. Stories that grew darker with every telling. Some claimed she possessed supernatural powers. Others claimed she could summon spirits. A few even whispered that she had made a pact with darker forces. Whether anyone truly believed those stories no longer mattered, because once fear begins growing, facts often become less important than rumors. and Salisbury was becoming afraid. 4 years, Anne Bodenham had lived quietly within Salisbury. People sought her advice. They sought her remedies. They sought her knowledge. But all of that was about to change, because fear often begins with a single accusation. And in Anne Bodenham's case, that accusation came from a young servant girl named Anne Stiles. At first, their relationship seemed ordinary. The older woman and the younger servant had known one another for quite some time. Yet, something happened between them. Something that would eventually lead to one of England's most infamous witch trials. According to Anne Stiles, Anne Bodenham possessed knowledge that no ordinary woman should possess. She claimed the older woman spoke of hidden powers, of secret knowledge, of forces that existed beyond the understanding of ordinary people. At first, many dismissed the stories, but the accusations soon became darker, much darker. Anne Stiles claimed that Anne Bodenham had introduced her to spiritual practices forbidden by both church and law, practices many believed could only come from the devil himself. The young woman spoke of strange conversations, strange instructions, and terrifying encounters she claimed had taken place in secret. As word spread through Salisbury, people began listening more carefully. Every rumour suddenly seemed important. Every whisper gained significance. Every old story about Anne Bodenham returned to the surface. The woman once seen as wise was now being viewed with suspicion. Neighbours began looking at her differently. Friends became cautious, and fear began spreading through the city. Because if Anne Stiles was telling the truth, then Salisbury was not merely home to a cunning woman. It was home to a witch. And in 17th-century England, few accusations were more dangerous. The authorities soon became interested. Questions were asked. Witnesses were gathered. Stories were collected. And as the investigation deepened, Anne Stiles made an even more shocking claim. She said that Anne Bodenham had shown her something impossible, something that could not be explained, something she believed proved dark forces were truly at work. And if this was the claim, more than any other, that would convince many people that Anne Bodenham was guilty. Whether the story was true or whether fear had already begun twisting reality remains a mystery to this day. As the investigation continued, Anne Stiles made an extraordinary claim, a claim so strange that it would become one of the most famous parts of the entire case. According to her testimony, Anne Bodenham has shown her a spirit, not a dream, not a vision, a spirit. Something she claimed appeared inside a glass vessel. Anne Stiles described being taken into a room lit only by candles. The shadows danced across the walls. The air felt heavy, unnatural, as though something unseen was waiting in the darkness. Then, according to her account, Anne Bodenham placed a glass before her, and within that glass, she claimed a face appeared, a living face, a face that should not have been there. The young woman later told authorities she believed she was looking upon a supernatural being, a spirit, a familiar, perhaps even a demon. To modern ears, the story sounds impossible, but 17th century England was a very different world. Many people genuinely believed evil spirits walked among mankind. Many believed demons could take physical forms. Many believed witches commanded supernatural servants. And so, when Anne Stiles shared her story, people listened. Fear began spreading faster than ever, because if even part of the story was true, then Anne Bodenham was not simply a healer. She was something far more dangerous. Soon, the accusations reached the authorities, and Anne Bodenham was arrested. The city watched closely. Rumours filled the streets. Every tavern, every market, every home. People wanted answers. The trial became one of the most talked about events Salisbury had ever witnessed. Witnesses stepped forward. Stories were told. Old rumours resurfaced. Everything Anne Bodenham had ever done suddenly seemed suspicious. Acts once viewed as harmless became evidence. Knowledge once considered useful became dangerous. The courtroom was filled with tension. The judges listened carefully. The witnesses spoke confidently. And throughout it all, Anne Bodenham maintained that she was innocent. Yet the atmosphere had already changed. The fear was far too strong, the accusations too numerous, and the belief in witchcraft too deeply rooted. The outcome seemed almost inevitable, because in an age of fear, truth often struggles to be heard. The verdict arrived. Guilty. Anne Bodenham was convicted of witchcraft. The charge carried terrible consequences to the people of 17th century England. Witchcraft was not viewed as superstition. It was viewed as a crime against God, a crime against society, and a crime punishable by death. News of the verdict spread rapidly. Many celebrated, believing justice had been served, believing Salisbury had been protected from evil. Others remained silent, perhaps uncertain, perhaps afraid to speak, perhaps wondering whether the evidence had truly been enough. But regardless of private doubts, the decision had been made. Anne Bodenham's fate was sealed, and soon the sentence would be carried out. The day arrived. Crowds gathered. The streets filled with spectators. Some came out of curiosity. Some came out of fear. Others came simply because everyone else was there. Anne Bodenham was led through Salisbury, past the houses, past the markets, past the cathedral that had watched over the city for centuries. No one knew exactly what she was thinking. Perhaps she was frightened. Perhaps she was angry. Perhaps she remained convinced that the truth would one day emerge. Or perhaps she simply accepted that nothing she could say would change what was about to happen. The crowd watched in silence. The bells rang overhead, and the woman at the center of one of England's most famous witch trials prepared to meet her fate. Yet even as the sentence approached, a question remained. A question that historians still ask today. Was Anne Bodenham truly a witch? Or was she simply a victim of fear, living in a time when fear was far more powerful than evidence. And that question would continue haunting Salisbury long after Anne Bodenham herself was gone. The sentence was carried out, and with it, the life of Anne Bodenham came to an end. The crowd slowly dispersed, the whispers faded, the torches were extinguished, and Salisbury returned to its ordinary routines. The markets reopened, the church bells continued to ring. Children played in the streets. Life moved forward, as it always does. Yet something lingered, a feeling, a question, a doubt. Because while Anne Bodenham was gone, the stories remained. People continued speaking of the trial. They continued debating what had truly happened. Some remained convinced she had been a witch. Others quietly wondered if an innocent woman had been condemned by fear. After all, no one had seen any magic. No one had witnessed a supernatural power. What existed were stories, rumours, beliefs, and accusations. But in 17th century England, that was often enough. Years became decades, decades became generations. The details slowly blurred. Facts mixed with legend, and Anne Bodenham became something larger than the woman herself. She became a warning, a ghost story, a piece of local folklore whispered beside fires and shared across centuries. Even today, her name survives, not because anyone knows exactly what happened, but because nobody truly does. And perhaps that uncertainty is what keeps the story alive today. Because mysteries rarely disappear. They simply wait for someone new to discover them. And while Salisbury eventually moved on, the fear that created Anne Bodenham's trial did not disappear. It travelled across oceans, across generations, and eventually it would reappear in another small community. A community far from England. A community known as Salem. Nearly 40 years after Anne Bodenham's death, another community would find itself consumed by fear. This time, across the Atlantic Ocean, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, a place called Salem. There too, people began whispering about witches. There too, neighbors accused neighbors. Friends accused friends. Children accused adults. And fear spread faster than reason. The Salem Witch Trials would become one of the most famous events in history. But the ideas that fueled Salem did not appear overnight. They had travelled from England, carried by settlers, carried by religious beliefs, carried by generations who genuinely feared witchcraft and the devil's influence. The same fears that haunted Salisbury, the same fears that surrounded Anne Bodenham, the same fears that convinced ordinary people extraordinary evil was hiding among them. And perhaps that is the most chilling part of the story, because Anne Bodenham may never have cast a spell. She may never have summoned a spirit. She may never have practiced witchcraft at all. Yet fear gave those accusations power. Fear convinced people they were true. Fear transformed rumours into certainty. And fear ultimately decided her fate. Perhaps the real danger was never witchcraft. Perhaps the real danger was something far more human. The fear of the unknown. The fear of being different. The fear of things we do not understand. And that fear has followed humanity throughout history, from Salisbury to Salem and beyond. Salisbury Cathedral still stands beneath the English sky, its great spire watching silently over the city. And only a short journey away, Stonehenge continues to guard its own ancient secrets. The landscape remains unchanged in many ways. Ancient, beautiful, mysterious, and somewhere among those old streets, the memory of Anne Bodenham still lingers. Not as a witch, not as a monster, but as a reminder of what can happen when fear becomes stronger than truth. And perhaps that is the most haunting ghost of all. Good night, and may your dreams be kinder than history.